slightly conversely to that is the observation that patience can be a virtue and it is not the same thing as indecision. If you're undecided, then there's some nagging doubt there, then maybe you do need to take a little bit more time. You need to take the flak that's thrown every time when you're not making a decision. It's out there in the public domain. But there was, again, something I discovered when I was going through my diaries, which I thought showed this up pretty well. It's in 1996, it's in relation to devolution policy. And this was at the end, we were getting flack all over the place because Tony couldn't decide about this and the Scots were giving us grief and what have you. And then eventually, another one of his kind of Monday morning moments when he comes in after a weekend and he's sort of just, he's worked things through. Let me just briefly read this to you, and because I think it illustrates the point. We went through the speech for Scotland Tomorrow with TB. He suddenly piped up he had plans for major changes to devolution policy. He wanted to limit tax-raising powers. He wanted to promise a referendum before the Parliament was established. And he wanted it made explicit that power devolved is power retained at Westminster. That, he said, is the answer to the West Lothian question. He said it in that way he has of making clear he's thought it through and nothing is going to dissuade him. I had no problem with any of it, thought it was sensible and right, but Scottish politics is a nightmare. Pat McFadden, Scottish advisor, rightly said there would be hell to pay in the party, not least from GB. TB said they'll just have to live with it. He said he'd been reading Jenkins' book on Gladstone, and the reason he didn't do Home Rule was because these same kind of arguments were put to him, and they were nonsense. He said he was absolutely clear about it. He intended at some point in the not-too-distant future to make a speech on it, stay in Scotland for a few days, take all the shit that was flying, and win the argument. He said we'll fall 10 points in the polls because of all the noise, and then do you know what will happen? The party will breathe a sigh of relief, and the public will think we've seen sense because we finally have a defensible position. Me then, he was terrific when he was like this. I could forgive him all the mithering and the circular conversations and the weakness with some of his key relationships when he was like this, clear, principled, determined, set to lead from the front. The Scottish media would go into one of their frenzies, but it was right. It was a sensible thing to do, and only he really had the balls to say and then do it. And that is exactly what happened. He went up, made a speech, there was a massive great frenzy, the Scottish media went mad, the Scottish party went off the rails for a bit, and we went down in the polls because of all the division, and then slowly it settled and stabilised, and we finally had a position, and instead of actually talking about delivering a Scottish Parliament, it was delivered.